Her name was Jenny, and she looked Asian. So my friends just had to remind me.
Thought you can't date Japanese girls, Jeff.
I guess Jenny just reminded me more of me. The only difference was she took pride in being a Hapa. She'd always grab a yellow and a white straw when we got slushies. Jenny grew up in Kelowna, never having experienced any sort of racism. I realized it was because she was proud to be half Japanese. And it was because I was ashamed to be different that I allowed people to pick on me. This one time, my friend actually said to us,
Hey, if you have kids, they'll be full Japanese.
In which Jenny replied,
Okay, wait, where do you think the white halves go, baka?
After What Are You Anyways, I made another film called Yellow Sticky Notes, and it was a little short film that was created on Post-it notes, like these right here actually, these little Post-it notes. And what I did is I animated on them, and it was about a 6-minute little film, but that film itself was probably the most successful film I've ever made because it went on to do over 80 film festivals and it won quite a few awards, and really got a lot of attention. And it ended up going on to YouTube. YouTube had acquired the film for what they called the screening room. And it's hit at about 1.5 million views right now on YouTube. So it's gotten a lot of eyeballs and a lot of people have seen it. And that's actually brought a lot of attention towards my other work as well. Yellow Sticky Notes was a film created as sort of a response to how busy my life had been getting because of the film work and because of sort of trying to manage everything in my life. What I was doing was these to-do lists. So I would write, to do, and all these things were what I had to do every day. And I was drowning in them, right? You can even see right now in the studio, I've got all these to-do lists, So what I did is I actually took the Post-it notes and I animated my self-reflection of the last 11 years of my life on these Post-it notes and kind of juxtaposed those with the to-do lists. So I looked at significant events that happened like 9/11, the South Asian tsunamis, sort of those things, the big world issues that happened that I didn't really think about when they happened because I was so busy, but now I have gone back and reflected on those events and how they actually did affect my life in some way. So that film, I think, for a lot of people really resonated with sort of their own lives, right? And how busy everyone is and how we just need to slow down a bit and just sort of breathe and look at the world around us, right? One Big Hapa Family was sort of a film that came out of that What Are You Anyways animation I made. It was sort of like an extension of that, whereas I was at a 2006 Japanese-Canadian family reunion because my mother is Japanese-Canadian. And on her side of the family, I was at the reunion and I kind of was looking around at all the kids and I noticed every single kid there was of mixed Japanese descent. And all of my mother and her aunts and uncles and cousins, or all that group after my grandparents' generation, had all married someone non-Japanese. So no one had actually married another Japanese Canadian after my grandparents' generation. And I was like, well, that's strange because there's like 30 people who had all married Caucasians. No one else after my grandparents' generation had married another Japanese Canadian. So I thought, okay, well, what's going on here, right? Like, what happened after that? Why is it one generation all of a sudden now all of them have married, Caucasians or someone outside of the Japanese Canadian community? So I kind of went on this journey to find out. And along the way, I kind of realized that this is a very Canadian story. Japanese Canadians, there's a 95% to 98% intermarriage rate between Japanese Canadians. So that means that every single Japanese Canadian in Canada is marrying someone who's not Japanese Canadian. And if you look at how that stat compares to other ethnic minority groups, like Chinese Canadians, if you look at the overall, they're only at maybe a 17% intermarriage. South Asians are 13%. So why is it the Japanese Canadians are so high? So this documentary is a 4-year journey that I took to find out what happened that sort of, brought the Japanese to mix and to blend with other sort of groups, right? And how does that affect the Japanese Canadian community in Canada, and how is it going to affect multiculturalism if we are mixing and blending and diversifying? So traveling sort of around, because I talked to a lot of sort of Japanese historians, I talked to my family, I talked to the elders in my family, I talked to 4 generations of my family. So I talked to my grandpa, who's 92 at the time, and all the way down to a child who's 2 and is 1/4 Japanese Canadian. So I try and find, how is our identity shifting? How is Japanese Canadian, our notion of being Japanese Canadian, how is that shifting? And what I found is that there's a scare that we're maybe diluting ourselves, right? And I don't like that word diluting because it means that we're weakening. But in actuality, what I found is that the kids who are 1/4 Japanese Canadian are more Japanese than my mother, who is full Japanese Canadian, because they're embracing that part of them more so because they like that part of them that's different. What I found, sort of, because my family wasn't interned. During World War II, we lived in Kelowna, so we didn't have our homes taken away from us, but we still have a high intermarriage rate. So some people think that has to do a lot with the war, right? The war had spread us around, there weren't a lot of Japanese Canadians around, it was the forced assimilation by the government, and these are all factors, obviously. But there's some underlying other factors that happened in these other regions, like Kelowna, where there was a lot of racism towards Japanese Canadians, and from city council, from the mayor, and that really sort of like pushed them to want to become more Canadian, right? And this is all expanded on in much more great detail in the film, but in the whole grand scheme of things, yeah, it has a lot to do with World War II and the internment, as well as sort of how they were dispersed across Canada, and there's a lot of factors actually that are the reasons behind the high intermarriage rate. But then it also shows how we're progressing, as a community, right? And how we're actually growing, right? We're getting bigger because we're bringing other people into our community. And I think that is the celebratory part of the documentary.